Breaking news has shaken the very foundation of the tennis world today. Roger Federer, a living legend known for keeping his nose clean and avoiding drama, has just blown the lid off the true story behind Alex Eala's viral video controversy. The details he has brought to light have left the entire community absolutely floored. It is a development that not a single analyst or fan predicted. We are talking about a surging young prodigy, a video clip that nearly broke the internet. And now the most dignified voice in the sport is finally breaking his silence. His statement is completely rewriting the narrative we all accepted as fact. To understand the gravity of this, we have to go back to what seemed like just another standard day on the tour. Alex Eala, the phenomenal talent from the Philippines, who has been rocketing up the world rankings with sheer willpower and grit, was stepping onto the court for a match everyone expected to be business as usual. Her eyes were locked on the prize, her motivation was sky high, and she was poised to demonstrate her elite skills yet again, under the bright lights of the global arena. However, the events that unfolded immediately after would flip the script entirely. Deep into a pivotal point in the third set, the broadcast lenses picked up a shocking development. Alex, clearly overwhelmed by a wave of emotion, seemed to completely collapse mentally right there on the sidelines. It was a raw, unguarded, and incredibly intimate display of vulnerability. It took mere hours for that specific clip to ignite a wildfire across virtually every social networking site in existence. X, formerly Twitter, was in an absolute frenzy. Instagram Reels were flooded with reposts, while content creators on TikTok began analyzing every single pixel of the footage. View counts skyrocketed into the millions, drawing eyes from all over the planet. Meanwhile, the comment sections turned into virtual war zones, with a portion of the audience sharing genuine worry for the young athlete's mental state. One distressed fan commented that she was obviously in pain, asking pointedly why nobody was stepping in to offer assistance to the struggling star. Conversely, other voices lacked that empathy, raising sharp questions about her psychological fortitude and whether she had what it takes to survive in the big leagues. The online argument intensified, becoming more vitriolic as the clock ticked. Professional tennis pundits scrambled to offer their hot takes on the video. Sports writers churned out lengthy editorials and think pieces. It felt like every single person with an internet connection had a theory about the scene they had just witnessed. Was this simply a human moment deserving of privacy or a symptom of a systemic problem rotting the sport from within? The guessing game was relentless, yet concrete answers were nowhere to be found. Adding layers of difficulty to this already messy situation was the specific backdrop against which this incident occurred. Alex had been shouldering a crushing amount of stress, carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire country on her back. She faced the suffocating expectation of being the Philippines' next global icon, coupled with the relentless microscope placed on young women in the professional athletic circuit. She was hauling around invisible loads that the average viewer scrolling through their phone could not even begin to fathom. The clip depicted her slumped on the courtside bench face, buried in her palms with her shoulders trembling, while her opponent waited uncomfortably across the net. Match officials looked at one another with confusion, and the stadium audience went dead silent, paralyzed by the awkwardness of the scene. It was a raw display of humanity served up for global consumption and judgment. However, there is a massive piece of the puzzle the public missed: the reality that the lenses failed to record. These critical details stayed buried in the shadows until Roger Federer made the executive decision to shine a light on the truth. That looping clip that everyone has been reposting and debating represents only a tiny, misleading fragment of the actual event. The true chain of events is significantly more complicated, disturbing, and vital than the public consensus suggests. While the footage racked up views, Alex went completely dark. She issued no press releases, posted nothing online, and declined all interview requests. Her management put out a curt statement requesting space, but that only threw gasoline on the fire of gossip. People demanded to know what she was covering up and why she refused to stand up for herself. Her lack of communication morphed into a controversy of its own, proving once again that the internet absolutely detests a void of information. Just as the armchair detectives felt they had solved the case, and as the buzz began to die down, Roger Federer stepped up to the microphone and turned the entire world upside down. For 5 agonizing days, the entire tennis ecosystem felt like it was stuck in a weird state of suspended animation. That one viral moment had swallowed the tournament whole, eclipsing the actual scores and championship-level plays that were happening. The whole world was discussing Alex, yet not a single soul was actually speaking to her. Meanwhile, behind the curtain, hushed discussions were taking place. Athletes who were present at the venue were seen exchanging significant knowing glances with one another. When pressed about the breakdown, coaches responded with extremely cautious, calculated language. The atmosphere suggested that the insiders held the keys to the truth, but fear kept them from breaking the code of silence. Alex, meanwhile, stayed completely isolated from the public eye. Insiders near her camp reported that she was absolutely crushed, not only by the on-court incident, but by the ruthless public backlash to her moment of weakness. She had been scrolling through the feedback, watching the clip go round and round, seeing her identity stripped away until she was nothing more than a meme and a talking point for strangers. The emotional cost was painfully obvious to the inner circle who interacted with her daily. At the same time, people embedded in the sport started leaking tiny scraps of intel off the books. A prominent coach hinted that the environment surrounding that specific match was far from normal. An athlete speaking under the condition of anonymity implied that under those specific pressures, any player on tour would have snapped just like Alex did. A reporter who was sitting right by the court alluded to serious friction happening off-camera that the TV feed missed. These little clues only serve to deepen the enigma. What kind of conditions? What sort of friction? What actually transpired in the moments before the red light went on and captured that now notorious scene? The list of questions grew longer by the minute, yet solid facts were impossible to find, causing the social media landscape to fracture even further. One faction of the tennis community vehemently argued that Eala was being subjected to an unfair double standard, pointing out that male competitors frequently smashed rackets or screamed without facing anywhere near this level of erupted. Conversely, the opposing side maintained a hardline stance, insisting that elite professional athletes are paid to uphold a standard of stoicism and composure, no matter how high the stakes or pressure may be. This controversy rapidly spiraled outward, igniting fierce debates regarding mental health protocols, deep-seated gender bias in officiating, and the crushing weight placed on young stars in the modern era of sports. Renowned sports psychologists began appearing on news segments, offering their professional analysis on the visible signs of burnout and the psychological toll of the tour. While retired legends offered vague anecdotes about their own on-court meltdowns, the major tennis federations merely released boilerplate corporate statements pledging their commitment to athlete wellness. However, all of this chatter failed to address the actual catalyst for the incident, primarily because the heartbreaking reality was known only to a tiny, tight-knit circle of insiders. Consequently, Alex Eala's world ranking began to plummet as she withdrew from several subsequent high-profile tournaments, sparking rumors of a career collapse. Lucrative sponsorship contracts that were in the final stages of negotiation suddenly went cold, and opportunities destined for the Filipina ace were quietly redirected to other emerging talents. That viral video clip, which clocked in at less than 2 minutes, was systematically dismantling every single facet of the professional career she had worked a lifetime to build. Despite the corporate backlash, her loyal fanbase mobilized, flooding timelines with supportive hashtags and demanding respect for the young phenom. Tennis communities across the Philippines organized massive digital campaigns to shield their national hero, while messages of love and solidarity arrived from every corner of the globe. Yet through it all, Alex remained completely radio silent, battling private demons far away from the public eye. Then on day 6, the narrative shifted dramatically. Roger Federer, the Swiss maestro who had officially stepped away from professional competition but remained the sport's ultimate ambassador, broke his silence with a social media post that stopped the scrolling world in its tracks. The statement was incredibly short, utterly cryptic, and yet it carried enough weight to dominate every headline instantly. It read simply, "Sometimes the truth needs a champion. Press conference tomorrow." The entire tennis ecosystem collectively held its breath in anticipation. Speculation ran wild regarding what the 20-time Grand Slam champion knew and why he was intervening. By the next morning, the media center was overflowing with standing room only. Reporters from every major global sports network had fought for credentials and camera lenses, created a wall of glass at the rear of the room, the atmosphere buzzing with nervous electricity. When Roger Federer finally approached the microphone, he moved with his usual elegance, but his face carried a grave intensity that commanded absolute reverence from the chaotic room. He leaned in to speak, and the cacophony of shudders and murmurs instantly died down to a pin-drop silence. "I have made it a point to remain neutral on many topics over the decades, preferring to let my racket do the talking and keeping a healthy distance from the daily drama of the tour. However, the events I witnessed last week and the subsequent character assassination I have watched unfold compel me to break that rule and speak up today. Alex Eala is being crucified, and she deserves far better than this. The tennis world needs to hear the actual context behind those images. Federer took a long, deliberate pause, allowing the gravity of his opening statement to sink into the minds of everyone present. I happened to be at that tournament, not as an official, but simply as a fan who loves this game, and I saw firsthand what transpired in the tunnel before she ever stepped onto the court. I witnessed the agony during the match that the broadcast feeds conveniently missed, and I saw a young woman being failed by the very institutions designed to safeguard her. He then proceeded to systematically dismantle the public narrative, detailing the tragic circumstances that triggered her emotional collapse. Just hours before the coin toss, she received a devastating phone call confirming that an immediate family member back in the Philippines had been hospitalized in critical condition. She had formally petitioned tournament organizers to push her match back by 24 hours, a completely standard request given the gravity of the situation. But officials prioritizing TV slots and scheduling logistics denied her plea. She begged for just one single day. Federer recounted his voice, remaining calm but thick with suppressed outrage. Just one day to process the shock of potentially losing a loved one. One day to compose herself mentally before performing on a global stage. Instead, she was given an ultimatum: take the court immediately or be forced to withdraw, which would incur heavy fines and ranking penalties that could derail her qualification for future majors in 2026. The press room erupted into a frenzy of gasps and whispers, with journalists frantically typing out this bombshell revelation. This context completely transformed the narrative from a story about a temper tantrum into one of institutional cruelty. Federer did not stop there, revealing that during the match itself, Alex received a terrifying update on her mobile device during a permitted bathroom break. She learned that her family member's condition had rapidly deteriorated, leaving her to grapple with a heartbreaking dilemma in real time. She had to choose between walking away and facing professional suicide or trying to play through the tears while her heart was thousands of miles away. What you all analyzed in that video was not a lack of mental fortitude or professionalism, Federer declared with piercing authority. What you were actually watching was a terrified young woman trying desperately to hold the pieces of her soul together while enduring a nightmare scenario no athlete should ever face. She was backed into a corner by administrators who valued the schedule of play more than the human being holding the racket. But Federer had more to say. He turned his gaze to the cameras, directly criticizing the media for rushing to judgment and destroying a reputation without bothering to investigate the facts. He specifically called out the commentary teams who had mocked her professionalism during the broadcast. Within moments of the press conference, concluding the landscape of social media had completely inverted. The platforms that had been used to attack her suddenly became battlegrounds of remorse and defense, with users deleting past criticisms in droves. The villain narrative was obliterated, replaced by a wave of sympathy, leaving the public struggling to reconcile their previous outrage with the new truth. Encouraged by Federer's stance, other veteran players began stepping forward, sharing their own horror stories of when the tour put profits over people. Tennis legend Serena Williams immediately took to social media to voice her support, tweeting, "We simply must do better by our young players always." Meanwhile, Rafael Nadal posted a heartfelt message emphasizing that compassion should never take a backseat in the world of competitive sports. A wave of solidarity swept through the locker room as current players across both the men's and women's tours began speaking out about the crushing mental pressures they endure and the rigid, unforgiving nature of modern tournament structures. The online fan communities that had been sharpening their pitchforks and criticizing Alex Eala just days ago suddenly found themselves facing a massive wave of backlash for their rush to judgment. Almost overnight, timelines were inundated with apology posts flooding Instagram and Twitter as users scrambled to walk back their harsh words. The phrase "I didn't know the full story" quickly became the internet's most common refrain. But for many observers, that excuse rang hollow. The reputational damage felt like it was already done. Weeks of vitriolic commentary and negative headlines could not be erased with a simple "I'm sorry," and notably not everyone was ready to accept Roger Federer's version of events at face value. Some cynical commentators questioned why the Swiss maestro had waited several days to speak up, while others floated the theory that he was being manipulated by Alia's management team for a publicity spin. A few hardline voices in the tennis media continue to argue that while personal problems are sympathetic, they shouldn't exempt professional athletes from their contractual obligations on the court. However, the focus shifted rapidly as tournament officials found themselves under intense scrutiny for their handling of the situation. The organization that had famously denied Alia's postponement request released a stiff statement defending their decision, citing a need to adhere to established protocols and maintain fairness for all competitors in the draw. But that corporate statement only served to pour gasoline on the fire, intensifying the criticism coming from every corner of the sports world. The public demanded to know how could it possibly be considered fair to force a human being to play a game while they were grappling with a severe family emergency. What kind of archaic protocols prioritize television schedules and match timings over basic human decency and empathy? Sports journalists who had initially penned critical think pieces about Eala's meltdown were now frantically publishing follow-up articles with vastly different tones, with some bravely acknowledging their mistakes in rushing to judgment. Others attempted a more awkward pivot, trying to defend their original coverage, while clumsily incorporating the new exonerating information into their narrative. The credibility of the sports media establishment itself became a central part of the debate, as tennis governing bodies faced deafening demands for immediate policy overhauls. Under mounting pressure, the WTA released a formal statement promising to conduct a thorough review of their exceptional circumstances policies to better prioritize player well-being in the future. Simultaneously, the ITF announced it would convene a special committee specifically to examine and modernize emergency withdrawal procedures. But many veteran observers noted with skepticism that these were the same vague promises that seemed to follow every major controversy, rarely resulting in any meaningful systemic change. Corporate sponsors also found themselves navigating treacherous public relations waters as the public sentiment shifted. Brands that had hastily distanced themselves from Eala after the viral video now looked tone-deaf and opportunistic. And while some attempted to re-engage with offers of renewed support, the sincerity of those moves was widely questioned. Other major partners chose to remain completely silent, hoping the storm of controversy would blow over without forcing them to take a definitive public stance. The debate quickly expanded far beyond the boundaries of tennis, sparking broader conversations across society. It became a flashpoint for discussions about toxic workplace culture, the lack of mental health support, and the harsh treatment of young women in high-pressure competitive environments. Psychologists appeared on primetime news programs to discuss the lasting trauma of public shaming, while sociologists analyzed how our viral culture encourages judgment without any context. The story had truly transcended sports entirely, becoming a global talking point about empathy and humanity. But amid all the reactions, hot takes, analyses, and debates, one crucial voice remained notably absent. Alex Eala herself had still not spoken publicly since the incident. The entire world was arguing about her, defending her and criticizing systems on her behalf, yet she had not shared a single word of her own perspective. That radio silence was about to end as exactly 72 hours after Federer's bombshell press conference, Alex Eala posted a video to her personal social media channels. That was a 19-year-old girl who just wanted to be with her family, but was trapped in a system that wouldn't let her go. But Eala didn't just share her pain, she pivoted to the bigger picture. She also addressed the volatile public reaction with a level of maturity and insight that surprised many viewers. She acknowledged that people had made judgments based on limited information, and while it hurt deeply, she understood the nature of viral content and the speed of instant commentary in 2026. However, the fundamental issue she simply could not tolerate was the flawed institutional framework that allowed these heartbreaking scenarios to unfold in the first place. She emphasized that tennis legend Roger Federer was under no obligation to intervene on her behalf. He owed her nothing, yet he stepped forward because his moral compass demanded it. He recognized the inherent injustice in the treatment she received and utilized his massive platform to insist on immediate systemic evolution. For that act of solidarity, she pledged a lifetime of gratitude while also sending a heartfelt shout-out to her loyal fan base, particularly the unwavering supporters from the Philippines who stood by her side through the storm. She also took a moment to recognize the camaraderie within the locker room, thanking the competitors who sent private messages of strength and shared their own similar struggles behind the scenes. Her ultimate wish was that her painful experience would serve as a catalyst for meaningful policy reforms to safeguard the well-being of the next generation of athletes. Nevertheless, she remained firm in establishing strict personal boundaries regarding her private life moving forward. She explicitly stated that the details regarding her grandmother's medical condition were a private family matter, and she would not be issuing further bulletins or leveraging her family's trauma for media attention. This statement was intended to be her final word on the matter to correct the narrative, allowing her to pivot her energy entirely toward personal healing and her professional return. She declared, quote, "I cherish this sport. I thrive on competition and I am proud to play for my flag. but I am also a human being, with a family with deep emotions and with physical and mental breaking points. She firmly asserted that she should never be forced to apologize for her humanity, and neither should any other athlete on the tour. The 12-minute video message left an immediate impact, with the vast majority of viewers moved to tears, flooding the comment sections with waves of unconditional support. Even the skeptics and pundits who had initially judged her harsh withdrawal were forced to pivot, admitting they had completely misjudged the gravity of the situation. It was her raw vulnerability combined with unshakable honesty and a refusal to adopt a victim mentality while demanding accountability that struck a chord with the world. Analysts and fans alike were stunned by how Eala conducted herself, displaying a level of grace and maturity that far exceeded that of veterans twice her age. She managed to take a potentially career-ending scandal and transmute it into a powerful teaching moment, turning the Alex Eala controversy into a lesson for the sport. This incident laid bare the deep structural fractures within professional tennis that had been festering for years but had largely gone unnoticed or ignored by the establishment. The combination of Federer's public defense and Eala's poised rebuttal forced a long-overdue reckoning for a sport that often prioritized archaic traditions over necessary modernization. In the weeks that followed, we finally started seeing concrete, tangible changes being implemented by the governing bodies. The WTA officially unveiled a revised emergency postponement protocol, granting players the right to reschedule matches during verified family or medical crises without facing punitive ranking deductions. Crucially, this updated policy included specific clauses covering mental health issues and emergency situations, signaling a monumental shift in how the administration prioritizes the holistic welfare of its athletes. In 2026, under the new rules, tournament directors are now mandated to formally document any denial of such requests and must submit a detailed justification to independent oversight committees for review. However, these policy updates were merely the tip of the iceberg, as the Eala incident ignited a much wider debate regarding the fundamental infrastructure of professional tennis. Difficult questions arose regarding the grueling schedule. Exactly how many tournaments should athletes be mandated to play annually, and what safeguards shield young prodigies entering this high-pressure circuit? Furthermore, critics demanded to know who was responsible for auditing the quality and availability of mental health support systems at major events. These inquiries, which had been brushed aside for decades, suddenly required immediate responses, leading several top-ranked stars to advocate for a players' union with actual collective bargaining power. Unlike their counterparts in other major leagues, tennis pros have historically functioned as independent contractors rather than employees, protected by a collective agreement. This structural reality has historically left them exposed to systemic exploitation, a situation that disproportionately affects rising stars who lack the leverage of Grand Slam champions or massive endorsement deals. The sports media landscape also faced a serious moment of self-reflection regarding its coverage tactics. Multiple leading sports networks issued new internal protocols regarding viral content, emphasizing the duty to verify context before broadcasting reactionary opinions on emotional athlete outbursts. Even journalism programs began integrating the Eala case into their ethics modules, citing it as a prime example of how the race for engagement metrics can fundamentally undermine responsible reporting. For Alex Eala personally, the aftermath of this entire saga proved to be a complete metamorphosis. Her transparency and dignified composure throughout the ordeal garnered a level of respect from the global community that far surpassed what she could achieve through ranking points or trophies alone. Corporate sponsors who had initially paused their campaigns were suddenly vying for her signature, and she evolved into a highly sought-after advocate for athlete mental wellness, receiving invitations to keynote major conferences discussing the human element of elite competition. Most significantly, she returned to the tour on her own terms. Her grandmother made a full recovery, and Eala was able to support her through that process without destroying her own career. When she finally stepped back onto the hard court, fans and analysts immediately noted she was playing with a newfound sense of liberation and self-assurance. She appeared unburdened, no longer carrying the crushing weight of trying to maintain an illusion of being superhuman. She proved she could deliver world-class tennis performance while remaining unapologetically and authentically herself. As for Roger Federer, his intervention in this narrative has become a definitive case study on how legendary figures can leverage their influence to drive substantive progress. He could easily have chosen to remain on the sidelines, avoiding the messy politics of the tour during his peaceful retirement. Instead, he showed us that genuine leadership often requires voicing uncomfortable truths and directly challenging the institutions that profit from the silence of others. His readiness to stand as a shield for Aya established a powerful precedent, encouraging other tennis icons to speak out whenever they witness injustice in the sport we all love. That infamous footage that sparked this entire controversy can still be found circulating across social media platforms, racking up fresh views by the hour. But the context surrounding those images has shifted dramatically in the wake of these revelations. What the public initially interpreted as a simple on-court meltdown or a lack of mental fortitude has evolved into a powerful symbol of a much larger critical conversation taking place within the sport. This stands as the pivotal turning point when the tennis community was forced to finally admit that athletes are people before they are competitors, and that their mental and physical well-being must take precedence over rigid broadcast schedules, world rankings, or spectator entertainment. When Roger Federer stepped forward to speak out, he accomplished far more than simply clarifying the heartbreaking truth behind Alex Eala's widely shared moment of distress. He shined a harsh spotlight on our collective tendency to pass judgment without context, as revealed a corporate structure that has long valued revenue streams over human lives, and underscored the urgent necessity for influential figures to stand up and demand systemic reform. Consequently, the narrative surrounding Eala has transcended the boundaries of the baseline, becoming something much more significant than a mere sports story about a match loss. It now serves as a stark, permanent reminder that behind every trending clip or meme lies a human being navigating genuine suffering, a person who deserves our empathy and support rather than blind criticism and online analysis. While the global tennis fraternity was initially shocked by the details of the situation, the lasting impact is far more vital. The culture of the sport itself has been fundamentally transformed. This historic evolution began with one young athlete's bravery in showing her vulnerability to the world and a legend's willingness to fight for her dignity. Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe it is time for the tour to implement mandatory policies accommodating family emergencies? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.